Welcome to Updoot Tales Malicious Compliance, where you do what they told you. Dun-dun, dun, and now you do what they told you. Dun-dun, dun, and now you do what they told you. Dun-dun, dun, and now you do what they told you. Dun-dun, dun, and now you do what they told you. Hey Updoot, you're not here to sing, you're here to tell stories. Oh, I guess I got a little bit carried away. Alright, I guess let's get on with it. Our first story is by Vitalskills. So, a little bit of backstory. A while back, I was in a wheelchair. My legs were so painful I wasn't able to stand on them, and I had pain attacks at night which would last for hours on end. Doctors couldn't figure out what the heck was wrong with me until I got even sicker. I started not being able to hold in food, only liquids. When I went to a specialist and did a blood test, it turns out I had a gluten intolerance, celiac disease. When I stopped eating gluten, I was able to walk within a few months. Turned out I have another disease affiliated with celiac disease called gluten neuropathy. It means that when I ingest gluten, my nerves are affected. To this day, when I eat gluten, the pain returns and I have a really hard time walking. Now, I work for a company as a help desk employee. I help people having technical issues with their internet, so to say. Due to the ongoing virus, we work at home every other week. Last week was a week I was supposed to work at the office. So, I have told everyone who needed to know about my affliction. I also told them about my trouble walking when I ingested something I shouldn't have. So last week, I ate something containing gluten. I cannot for the life of me figure out what it was, but it was clear as day. The night before I had to go to work, I went to bed with a lot of pain, and I knew it would get worse the following day. I told my partner I would ask to stay at home if I had a lot of trouble walking. The next day came around, and it happened like I thought it would. I was in so much pain, I needed my walking stick to get around. So, around 8 a.m., I called my floor manager and told him and asked if I could work from home. He told me a lot of people wanted to work at home for the most stupid reasons and told me I should come to the office. So I did. Instead of calling in sick, I mustered up all of my strength, took some heavy pain meds with me, and started my journey to the office. Now, normally it takes me about half an hour, but because I had a harder time walking than my gran, it took me more than an hour. I arrived at the office 15 minutes late and ran into the floor manager when I was taking my things out of my locker. At this point, I should tell you how I looked at the time. White as a sheet, hair in a messy bun, shaking from pain and leaning heavily on my walking stick. The pain was so bad, I was wincing and almost couldn't stand. My floor manager was floored. Lol. He took one look at me and his mouth fell open wide. He muttered something about not knowing it would be this bad and talking about my other colleagues and how they asked to work at home for small things, how he had to treat everyone equally, etc. I worked a full day, colleagues watching over me, getting me everything I need and taking awesome care of me. I heard one of them say how ashamed my floor manager was about making me come to work, and how his response was everything I hoped for. Needless to say, he told me whenever this would happen again, I would have no trouble calling in to work at home. I could have called in sick, but my belief is that they had to learn the hard way, or this would just have happened again in the future. I know it's probably not as epic as some stories on here, but I just wanted to share and make you enjoy the same pain-filled joy I had when I saw his face when he looked at me. It was the best thing ever. OP, it takes mad strength and determination to do what you did, but for doing so, you have gained a tremendous amount of respect from me, and I'm very happy to see that your coworkers treated you decently because of you coming in. Our next story is by David-Clowry. So this is a story from my dad a while ago, early 2000s. My dad worked for an engineer company and his recruitment department had a bit too much control over who worked for him. One day he was told he had to lay off some workers as they were bringing in new people. Shady, I know. And the people they brought in were garbage all the time, so my dad and his big brain laid off his recruiting department and the cretins they recruited. OP, I'm kinda glad your dad stood up for what was right and got rid of the recruiting company that was just trying to make a mess of things. You almost might say that the trash essentially took itself out. Our next story is by Ars-Torok. I only vaguely remember these events as I was 7 at the time. The rest of the details were filled in by my father. It was the mid-90s. My father was a highly paid business consultant. The company he worked for would hire him out to businesses who were trying to get off the ground. He would fly out, spend a few weeks with them, and train their management the finer points of business ownership. He also handled large projects such as the planning, building, staffing, and organization of new offices and such. For this, his company would charge anywhere from $300 to $400 an hour for his time, billed by the week at a minimum of 40 hours a week, or more if there was overtime. In exchange for this less than modest sum, the company took care of all of my father's expenses rather than push them off on the client. This went on for years. My mom quit her job to stay at home with me, and my dad held down the finances of the household himself. But he was gone for 3 weeks at a time, and when he was here, he was at the office. I was lucky if I spent any real time with him before than 2 days a month. This also negatively affected my parents' marriage. Then for my 6th birthday, my dad got me a model plane and a membership card to the airline his company used. In truth, it was a copy of his card, but 6-year-old me thought it was the coolest thing ever. It had my dad's name on it and the word Admiral. Bringing his concerns regarding his home life to his boss, my father had struck a deal. I would be flown out to him every third or so weekend. My father would pay the cost of the flights but would use his company account and thus have access to his frequent flyer discount, company discount, and would collect any loyalty points or what have you that I earned. I was flying for pennies on the dollar. I would spend the weekend with him in whatever hotel he was in, and we would go and do stuff in the city. He got to see me, I got to see both him and a new city, and Mom got to spend a weekend without me to decompress. Everyone loved the arrangement, myself especially. Fast forward a year, I have achieved Admiral status within the airline's loyalty program. Not a hard task as my dad already had that status and I was using his account, but I felt accomplished nonetheless, and have been to all 48 continental states. This is when something happened. There was a change in the company. People moved around, people were hired, and people were fired. And when all the dust settled, my dad found himself one position higher and under new management. Dad's new manager had no issues with the father and son getaway perk my dad was liberally using. But to offset the extra costs, there would be a few changes to my dad's expense account. While food and entertainment were fully covered, as many of his meetings happened over lunch, the manager decided that rather than provide my father with a rental car, instead he would take local transport via cabs or similar services, and would be given a limited number of trips he could take a day. Surely he only needed to travel twice a day to and from the site, so he was allotted 2 cab rides per day he was out of state, including weekends since the manager wanted to be generous. Any additional travel my father wanted to take would be on his own dime. My dad brought up that the company was not spending any resources on my trips aside from the 30 minutes of time it took the travel agent to book my flights. But this new manager insisted that this was a much better use of company time and resources. All other expenses, including the hotel, dry cleaning, and any mail that had to be sent, would be covered as usual. Now, normally my visiting weekends would be jam-packed with whatever local museum or attraction the city had, followed by a nice dinner at a cool or fancy restaurant. One does not achieve this with 2 cab rides a day. My dad blows all his cab rides on my next visit. We go and see everything. A museum, a movie, and a fair of some sort. Every trip was by cab. This is the part I remember because my dad had me keep count with him. An entire amazing day is spent and in total 11 cab rides were had. Now for the malicious compliance. Without any more allotted cab rides, after I was sent home, my dad was still scheduled for a week of work. He contacted the local post office and explained his situation. After some evil laughter from both him and the postman, a truck shows up at his hotel. He mails himself to work and then back again for the rest of the week. He pays for first-class delivery by the pound. This becomes exorbitantly expensive. At the end of the trip, my dad sent in an expense report that had a few $1,000s extra on it for shipping costs. The fallout. Some stuff happened. There was a change in the company. Some people were moved, some people were hired, and some people were fired. My father found himself under a new manager. The company decided that it was improper to have different rules for expenses for different employees based on their status or tenure. A fixed policy was enacted company-wide. My dad's new manager had no issues with sending me out once a month on my father's business account, as long as my father paid for the cost of the flights. OP, your dad is a maniacal genius for coming up with such a great plan, but I guess whenever you're in a bind, you do what you gotta do in order to keep your job. That was Updoot Tales Malicious Compliance, and if you enjoyed this video, make sure to click the thumbs up icon, as that tells YouTube that you really want to see more of my content. Also, if you want to subscribe, you can click the profile picture in the middle of the screen, or you can click the box on the right to see my latest videos. Also, my Twitter and Instagram accounts are listed at the bottom.